You can tell in less than 5 seconds if someone's brand is high value or not. You felt it. Some brands and some profiles instantly feel expensive, while others feels cheap. And most of the times, it has nothing to do with the product itself. It comes down to these 11 specific signals that most brands are getting wrong without realizing it. Which means you could be making your brand look low value right now, even if your content is good. So in this video, I'm going to break down all 11 of them and show you exactly how to fix them. Signal number 1 is understand that people do not judge your brand on one thing, but instead on multiple layers of perception. Because premium is built in the mind, not in the product. So there's hundreds of studies on this, and it shows that people typically evaluate brands and businesses across 5 different layers of perception. There's functional, social, emotional, epistemic, and conditional perception. And each of those perception builds on top of one another. Now, most people think that a lot of people see a brand from one specific aspect of the value. They only think of how this is gonna make them feel, or they're only gonna think about how this actually functions. But us as humans, we have different layers of things that are important to us. And because of these different layers, if you're a brand that's able to tap into every single layer of perception, then you'll be able to position yourself any way you want it. Whether you wanna make your brand feel expensive, exclusive, premium, or maybe you wanna make it look unique and a little bit different than most people in your space. When you understand there's different layers of perception to go through, you can start to piece out every single one of these perceptions and start working backwards on how to create that premium brand. Because when most people get it wrong is that they only think that one perception only works and they're only gonna double down on that one specific perception. Like if you wanna build a premium branding and brand that people remember over the decades, then you have to have a specific strategy for each one of these perception levels so that you'll be able to create a perception that you are that premium brand that people look for. So when you want to build a premium brand, you need to start with understanding what premium really means. It's not just one day you slap on a sticker and say, I'm a premium brand, or you have on your website that I'm exclusive and you can't buy a lot of our items. A lot of those will work in the short term, but it's not gonna build an actual strategy. And when you start understanding the different layers inside of the premium brands, that's how you're going to actually understand how to build a brand that people actually remember. And once you understand how people judge value, this is typically the first layer that they look at. Signal number 2 is functional clarity. So this is something that you probably already heard of because if your brand is confusing, it will never become any premium brand. Now, a lot of growing brands are typically struggling with this. They have different messaging on how they benefit people, on their exclusivity, and the images on their content and the messaging on their website looks very different. And the thing is, if people can't even have clarity on where you are and what your position is, then there's no point in actually building this whole thing. You can't make a premium brand because the way functional perception work is simply, does this work? And what does this actually do? Functional clarity means how can you communicate how your product works and how it helps people. So for example, Mercedes as a car. The car will take you from point A to point B, period. That's a functional perception of a car. When you're going to buy a car, you probably are going to be thinking, is this car going to take me from A to B, right? That is a functional layer of your perception. You gotta make sure that it works and it's actually going to solve your problem. So as a brand, you wanna make sure that this is very clear. Even if you're somebody like Mercedes, you gotta make sure that you communicate that this is the type of product that will take you to great distances. If you're thinking about Nike shoes, these are the type of shoes that will take you to different sporting events and actually get you to win something big. So if you can have a clear messaging on how the product works, then you check the box. You check functional perception. But this is only the start because it's not what makes something feel premium. Which brings us to signal number 3. Just control what your brand says about someone socially because people buy what reflects how they want to be seen. Humans are social creatures, and this is by nature. Back then, during our caveman days, we want to make sure that we are fitting in with our village, with our community, because if we're not, then we're not going to have any protection. We're not going to have any food, and that naturally evolves to what we have today. The social layer of your brand's perception is about what using your brand signal to other people in the community. Let's get back to the car example. You can compare Mercedes versus a Toyota. Now, this is where people in the comments is gonna say,
oh my god, I don't judge people by their car. This just doesn't make sense. Blah, blah, blah.
I can already hear the comments trolling. But somewhere deep down, there is a different feeling between a Mercedes and a Toyota. When you start driving a Mercedes, people around you will probably think that you have a good job, you're somewhat successful, maybe you have a little bit more money. Whether that's true or not, that's a whole different story, and I'm not even touching that. And when you drive a Toyota, there's a specific perception that your social community around you will view you because you drive a Toyota. Functionally, they're the same. They're cars that are going to take you from point A to point B. But the way that people perceive you socially makes a huge difference here. And that's the reason why Mercedes are able to position themselves as the premium car brand in the market. And psychologically, this works because us as humans wants to be accepted in our social community. We have values of what we think is important. And when we are accepted by those social communities that we're a part of, now you can start justifying why you wanted to buy a premium product in comparison to another product that might be functionally the same. Because typically, premium brands want to signal status, identity, some sort of belonging, and some sort of success behind your premium brand. Think about water brands. If you're drinking an Arrowhead water versus a Fiji water, people are going to look at you differently. And I've definitely had this with my own friend group. When I started drinking Fiji with my girlfriend, a lot of people would make comments about it. Oh, you're bougie, whatever. Even though these comments are very small and non-harmful, those are still the association that they are giving me because I just purchased Fiji. Now, this works with any other premium brands out there, and that's why the social layer is one of the most important layers out there. And here's how exactly you can use this for your own brand. When you start thinking about your brand, or if you already have a brand, start thinking about how does other people view your brand? What are some of the words and association that they have when someone consumes your brand? Is it unique? Is it different? Is it artsy? Is it a little bit premium? Is it expensive? Is it luxury? When you start thinking about this association, then this can create a strategy that you can implement in your content, in your photography, in your videos, in your websites to ensure that it aligns with what you're trying to communicate for other people to see your brand. The social layer of perception is one of the strongest ones out there. But this is where things start to get powerful. Signal number 4 is designed for emotional impact, because how your brand makes people feel matters a lot more than what it actually does. Which brings us to the emotional perception layer. Now, this layer works hand in hand with the social layer because it's one of the strongest drivers of behaviors in branding and purchasing. Instead of thinking about how people in my community will look at me if I buy the certain products, the emotional perception layer basically says that how will I feel as a consumer when I purchase this product or this service? Now let's go back to our car analogy. Let's think about Mercedes. Now, what does Mercedes want to communicate with you when you are able to purchase their cars? They want you to feel like you're important. They want to feel like you're luxurious. They want to feel like you're successful. Maybe you just got promoted from a job. Maybe something big just happened, right? They want to sell this feeling that if you have purchased a Mercedes, you're in a good part of your career. You're not just beginner level analyst anymore. You're maybe a manager. Maybe you're a director. Maybe you're a CMO or a VP, right? And Mercedes is able to communicate this through all channels of their marketing, from their website, to their videos, to their photos, all the way to the experience when you walk into a dealership. The dealership person typically makes you feel like you're important. They want to value your luxury, your success. So all of these different things add to that emotional perception layer. It makes you feel good. Now think about a brand like Apple, the premium brand for smartphones and laptops and computers. Now functionally, they're probably the same like their other competitors, but in Apple's marketing, you rarely see the actual functions of the actual phone or the actual laptop, but instead they sell the feeling that you will have when you own an Apple product. When you own an Apple Watch, you'll have that feeling that you're active and you can track everything and you'd feel good and healthy about yourself. When you have an iPhone, they're selling the feeling that makes you feel like you're a creative. You can take photos as good as these filmmakers. Whether or not that's true, besides the point. But Apple is able to communicate that feeling and make you feel important, make you feel like creative because they understand the emotional layer of perception. So how can you implement this to your own brand? Well, some of the things that you can do is pay attention to your content's tone, the type of storytelling, and you should think about this carefully and it should be engineered to create that specific feeling. Start writing about the feelings and associations you want your customers to feel when they own your product. And now you can start working backwards on how you can actually implement those ideas to make them feel the way that you want them to feel. But there's another layer that most people completely ignore. Signal number 5 is leverage novelty and curiosity, because things that feel new automatically just feel more valuable. Now, when I was a kid, I was a very curious kid. I always wanted the new toys, watch the new movies, watch the new shows, and I thought I only want the new things. And as I'm later grown up, I noticed the same thing. We crave something that is new and exciting, and that's just how our brain works. This is called an epistemic perception layer, which basically is driven by curiosity and feeling of newness. Our human brains are very simple. Typically, when things are starting to feel a bit stagnant, you want to try something new. Maybe it's a new hobby. Maybe it's a new look. Maybe you want to change your wardrobe, right? And because people want something new, as a brand, you can leverage this to be able to build a premium look and a premium feel. Now let's go back to our car example. Let's talk about Mercedes again. When you look at their websites or their content, you can see some of their newer models is portrayed in a way that feels just new. Either it's a new look, new colors, maybe even as simple as new photography in the background that looks a bit different than our old models, even though if the functions are not much different than the previous year's model. But the crazy thing is there is a twist in this particular layer of perception. Nowadays, the feeling of nostalgia and older models and older classics can also give you this feeling of something new. We're starting to see that nostalgia is making a comeback. So things from the 90s, from the 2000s, from the 2010s, because there's a feeling that these older stuff are making a comeback and making it feel new again. I'm not sure the reason why. Maybe it's because of AI making things look all perfect and we're going back to the analog look. Maybe even the more intricate designs that are more human. But all in all, we still crave that feeling of newness, that curiosity. So when you have unique positioning or even a new way to present your products, your brands can immediately stand out and feel new. And one way that you can do this with your brand is you want to have different ideas on how you can reinvent your products. Maybe not necessarily from the function perspective, but maybe a new way to communicate it. Maybe a new way to highlight certain features of it. Maybe a new photography or videography to make it feel like it's something new. Whenever you can pique these curiosities from your customers, your brand will be positioned as something that is exclusive and more premium. And the timing matters just as much as everything else. Which brings us to signal number 6, which is aligning your brand with the right moment. Because value typically changes based on the context. This is where we get into the conditional layer of perception. So depending on the timing, situation, and need, typically us as consumers have different levels of perception depending on what we need right now. Now let's go back to our car analogy. When you see some of the AMG models, maybe the AMG GTs, the one that's a bit more sporty and luxurious and premium, they typically probably appeal with people that are maybe just got promoted to a job, or maybe they're just got promoted to become director, or they have some big things that are happening in their life and they want to buy a sports car. But on the opposite side, when people just got married, or maybe they just have a kid or have children, right? When the different context and situation changes, now the AMG GT doesn't look very enticing anymore, but instead Mercedes can advertise their bigger SUV models like the GLCs, their EQEs, because these are going to fit those customers in their part of the journey. And conditional perception just basically based on purely timing, what situation your customers is in, and how can you really think about those needs and communicate your messaging towards that specific need or timing. Another good example of this is Tesla. Now think about the type of marketing that they were able to push out when the government had the incentives to switch into EVs. All of their marketing talked about these EV credits, and that is their biggest push in messaging to get people to convert from gas to EVs. Because when you know the specific moments that are important in your customers, now you'll be able to create specific messaging so that your brand can be established as premium during that specific moment that it happened in your customer's life. Now is where you start seeing these perceptions starts to stack and it starts to compound. Which brings us to signal number 7, which is using the halo effect to your advantage. Because one strong signal can elevate your entire brand. Now humans are very social creatures. And if you look at us back in the caveman days, typically we elect some sort of village leader, tribe, or whatever it is that we see as importance in our community. In our today's world, this is in the form of celebrities, actors, people of importance, content creators that have massive influence. And having a strong brand associations can influence how everything is perceived about your brand. When you start thinking about what kind of feelings and words that you want to associate your brand with, now you can start thinking about how can you leverage other people's effect, which is the halo effect, to help your brand rise up together. Think about the collaboration between Mercedes with Coco Gauff. Now, Coco Gauff is a very important tennis player and a very respected one. So with her pairing up with Mercedes, it's a win-win scenario to be able to elevate both brands together. Another example is with Tag Heuer with Chris Hemsworth and Cristiano Ronaldo. So Tag Heuer is a watch brand, and typically they want to appeal and get this feeling of manliness to it because a lot of male actually purchase their watches. So they were able to create a collaboration with Chris Hemsworth and Cristiano Ronaldo. And Chris Hemsworth does have a brand for him to being the manly man, right? He was in Thor, he was in Marvel, a lot of different movies. And look at Cristiano Ronaldo, arguably probably the best, most well-known male athlete alive. Being able to collaborate with these two giants only elevates Tag Heuer's brand both with Chris Hemsworth and Cristiano Ronaldo's as well. And you can see how the halo are going to start becoming bigger and bigger because they associate themselves with people of the right caliber and with the right associations. Think about Louis Vuitton with Zendaya or Rhode with Hailey Bieber. All of these pairings are carefully curated. Now, there's also bad ones out there, and we're not going to talk about those, but when you exactly know what your brand stands for and what kind of feeling you want to communicate, you can pick these associations carefully so that you'll be able to create a brand that people remember and leverage the other brands that somebody else have created so that they can join in with your brand and both rise up together. And this next one is one of the biggest signals when it comes to building a premium brand. Signal number 8 is controlling scarcity and access, because what is harder to get is always perceived as more valuable. Now, this is a classic supply and demand level. When you have low supply and high demand, you can charge high prices. But if you have a lot of supply and low demand, then you gotta charge low prices. Now, how this applies with your actual brand, when you start creating scarcity and limiting the supply that people can get into your products, now your brand can be perceived as more premium. But you have to do this carefully, because if you do this wrong, especially if you're a growing brand that nobody really knows yet, then you're just wasting away your efforts and people are just gonna forget your brand name. In order to make this work really well, you wanna make sure that you have all the other components laid up first before getting into the scarcity and access piece of the layer. Think about Hermes bag, and it's a great example of limiting access to some of their top tier bags. If you want to get some of the top tier Hermes bags, you got to be a previous Hermes customers, or if you're new, you're probably only going to get something that is more off the shelves, that is more common. Another example of this is Ferrari. You can't just go to a dealership and buy any Ferrari that you want off the dealership. Typically, when you go into a Ferrari dealership, you're gonna get an entry-level Ferrari. And once you show to Ferrari that you're a loyal customer and you want to buy more and more, then Ferrari will slowly give you access to some of their higher tier cars and more luxurious ones. Also, think about brand like Rolex. You can't just walk into a Rolex and get any type of Rolex that you want. There's typically a wait list, and you have to get onto that wait list, or you have to know somebody from the inside. Because technically, Rolex can just create more supply. They can create more watches, but they choose not to. Because when you have perceived scarcity through limited supply, now they can charge higher prices and make their brand feels more exclusive. It's like an exclusive club that only somebody from the inside can invite you in, and you're gonna prove to yourself that you're gonna be a good customer. And because of this, now your brand is seen as premium. So what you can exactly do for your brand is start thinking about how can you start limiting and manufacturing scarcity so you can keep tabs on the supply to make sure that it's not available towards everyone. But again, you have to do this correctly, or if not, it could destroy your whole brand. But even this is not enough on its own. Signal number 9 is using price as a signal, not just as a number that you set, because people associate the cost with the value that they'll receive. Now, there's hundreds of studies of this. When you're given a higher amount of price that you have to pay, this product is seen as higher quality or probably better for you. And this actually works in the premium brand space. If you want to create a premium brand, look at Ferrari, look at Porsche, look at Rolex, look at Versace, look at Christian Louboutin, right? All of these brands charges a lot of money for each one of their products. And they do this intentionally because this will allow people to feel that they're purchasing something of a higher quality. Whether or not that's true, you gotta back it up with the actual product. But in general, psychologically, people tend to associate higher quality and higher value for higher prices. So when you start thinking about your pricing, you should start thinking about it intentionally and not just reactive to the market. This works with any industry, and typically the higher that you charge, you also will attract those people that value that high premium feel as well. And this is where most brands typically fall apart. Signal number 10 is designing every sensory detail. Because when you want to be premium, the thing is you have to go beyond the perception and make it feel real, like actually feel it real, before people can understand it. And real quick, if you've gotten value so far from this video, all I ask is click that subscribe button and it will help out small channels like mine. Now let's get back into the video. Now all of the signals that we've talked about so far in this video has all been pretty much psychological. Things to make people feel a certain way by the way you communicate your photography, your videography, your text, how you present yourself. But this is one of the most underrated signals just yet. Because when you start making things very real, when somebody can not only see it, hear it, but also touch it and even smell it, that's where the perception really lasts a long time. And a lot of the premium brands have already figured this out. Now let's look at Singapore Airlines. They have a specific scent that they call the Stefan Floridian waters that they use on all their hot towels inside of their cabins, and a lot of the crews actually wore during flights. Now, this is very intentional. This scent, even though it's very tiny and typically not a lot of people really notice it, this adds to the whole experience when you're flying Singapore Airlines. Or my favorite, when you go to Ritz-Carlton, they use a global signature scent called the white tea and fig. And I kid you not, I love that scent so much, I've literally tried to find candles and things that smell exactly like the Ritz-Carlton, but I can't find a one-to-one exact match. So it just smells so unique, and I know I'm at a Ritz-Carlton or a high-end hotel when they have that signature scent. Or look at Cadillac. They were able to replace their generic new car smell with this proprietary interior scent. They call it nuance, so that it'll be unique when you get your new Cadillac. And when you're able to do this on top of the other signals that we just explained in this video, now you're making it real. People can actually smell it, touch it, hear it, all those chime that you see on commercials. That is a part of the sensory details. Because at the essence of it, brand is this association. And the more that people can associate things with your brand, the more that they'll remember. Or if you have a clothing brand, think about the type of packaging that you want to have and send out to your customers. Maybe making the materials a bit unique, because when they open up that box, that is an experience on its own. Because when you really zoom out, this is what ties everything together. Which brought us to signal number 11, which is always, you want to audit and engineer your perception intentionally, because most brands feel cheap by accident, not by design. And I've seen this over and over again. A lot of businesses and brands that we've worked with says, we want to be luxurious, we want to be premium. And the thing is, they don't take it very seriously. They never really audit how people perceive their brand and their services or their products across all of these different layers. And this not only works with the product brand, if you're a service companies as well, you can start thinking about this in terms of the experience that you give out to your customers. What kind of service do you want? Do you want to be the one that gives them a nice bow and maybe a little bit of a gift at the end of your services? Or you want to be the ones to make sure that communication is always on top of everything? All these little decisions and these little actions will build up the brand as the whole. And if you start thinking about this intentionally, you'll be able to start to consciously design how you want to be perceived, whether it's being premium, being unique, or whatever brand that you want to build. Now you gotta remember, when you go to places like Disneyland or places like Ritz-Carlton, every single thing from the moment that you really book a ticket to the moment that you walk in and experience the service is highly engineered and curated. From the scents, to what you see, to the lighting options, to the greetings, to how they handle problems, every single thing contributes to the brand. So if you're really serious about building a premium brand, you want to start mapping these out and start figuring these out one by one. So if you like this video, YouTube thinks that you also like this one. So let's see if they're right. And I'll see you in the next video.